A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Ladies and gentlemen, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the Caravan of Truth program after 3-month break. Today, in this 1 hour, in the Caravan of Truth program, we will be talking about 3 specific issues. In the first topic, we will explain the root cause of the ongoing ISIS and terrorism and how to eradicate the ISIS terrorism in the Islamic world. In the second subject, we will explain the major problem of the Afghanistan's people and the solution. In the third subject, we will tell a true story about the persecution of the constitutional right of free speech by the United States government. So please be with me this hour. In the first topic, we will explain the root cause now of the ongoing ISIS and terrorism and how to eradicate the ISIS terrorism in the Islamic world. For clarification, terrorism and ISIS do not exist in any Muslim country but just exist in some specific Islamic countries. In other words, the existence and non-existence of ISIS and terrorism are not random, but very predictable and obviously linked to the political, economic, and strategic interests of the West based on the following facts. 1, there are 50 Muslim majority countries in the world. But terrorism specifically exists in those Islamic countries which have mineral, oil, and raw materials, like the mineral-rich Afghanistan, the oil-rich Iraq, the oil-rich Libya, where the US and the colonial Europe are militarily involved. 2, ISIS and terrorism exist in those Muslim countries which do not have pro-Western regime. For clarification, the oil-rich pro-Western monarchies of Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Oman, Qatar, and Kuwait are immune from ISIS and terrorism. The obvious reason for the ISIS immunity of these monarchies is the fact that these 6 monarchies are semi-independent and serve the interests of the United States in the West for decades in the Middle East. Semi-independent means that all these 6 Arab monarchies just have internal freedom and autonomy, but the foreign policy of these 6 monarchies is controlled by the United States in the West for almost decades and decades. On the contrary, terrorism exists in those countries in the Middle East which do not have pro-Western regime. For instance, the only country in the Arab Peninsula is Yemen, which does not have a pro-Western regime. Therefore, the West is accusing Yemen for terrorism, and basically the 6 pro-Western monarchies led by Saudi Arabia are bombing the defenseless Yemeni people under the pretext of terrorism in the past 2 years for regime change to make a pro-Western government in Yemen. The third fact is that ISIS and terrorism in the Middle East has direct link to the security of Israel. For clarification, both Syria and Jordan have common border with the Zionist regime of Israel. But ISIS exists in Syria, but Jordan is immune from ISIS. The clear reason for this is the fact that Jordan is ruling by a pro-Western monarchy for decades, with just like the other 6 Arab monarchies of the Gulf serve the interests of the West in the Middle East. Therefore, the West does not want to destabilize Jordan by ISIS terrorism. But on the contrary, Syria has pro-Iranian regime. So the West is trying to destabilize Syria by ISIS for regime change in order to make a pro-Western regime in Damascus to guarantee the security of Israel, which was created by the United States in 1948 on the Palestinian land, and have unconditional support from the West until the present time. Based on the foregoing, ISIS and terrorism in the Islamic country is not random, but obviously have link to the political, economic, and strategic interests of the Western imperialism in the Islamic world. The fourth fact about ISIS and terrorism is the truth that ISIS and terrorism are mainly, ISIS and terrorists are mainly Western spies, fake converted Muslims, and mercenaries from different countries. For instance, let me tell you the true story of Ronald Fedler, who was one of the notorious terrorists in Afghanistan and later was killed in Iraq a few months ago. Ronald Fedler was a British spy who was born in Manchester in 1966. The British government had changed Ronald Fedler's name to a fake Arabic name as Jamaluddin al-Haris in order to purport that Ronald Fedler was a converted Muslim. Ronald Fedler was sent to Afghanistan for terrorism. During the Anglo-American invasion of Afghanistan in 2001, Ronald Fedler was arrested in Afghanistan and was sent to Guantanamo prison. Finally, in 2004, the United States had released Ronald Fedler from Guantanamo by the specific request of the UK or British government. After Fedler was released from Guantanamo prison, then Ronald Fedler had sued the British government on the ground that he was British spy but was sent to Guantanamo and was tortured in the prison. As a result, the British government had settled the lawsuit with Ronald Fedler without trial, and the UK government paid out £1 billion to the terrorist Ronald Fedler, who was a British spy. The reason for the settlement without trial was the fact that the UK government was trying to hide the evidence from the public about Ronald Fedler that he was a British spy and was sent to Afghanistan for terrorism. Anyway, in total, the British government had paid out £20 million in compensation for 4 British terrorists, including Ronald Fedler. Later, when the Obama administration in the West created ISIS in 2014 with the collaboration of Saudi Arabia and the Gulf oil-rich monarchies, the UK government sent Ronald Fedler again to Iraq to join ISIS. The British government had rechanged Ronald Fedler's name to Abu Zakaria al-Brithani to purport that he was a Muslim. Ronald Fedler traveled to Turkey, then crossed into Syria in April 2014, and finally joined ISIS in Iraq. Ronald Fedler was killed as an ISIS terrorist in the city of Mosul on 20th February, just this February, 2017, just a few months ago. Please see the photo of Ronald Fedler. Photo? Yes, fine. Yeah, this was the terrorist. This was his picture. Ronald Fedler is just one example. In fact, there are thousands and thousands of Western spies and non-Muslim mercenaries, just like Fedler in the ongoing ISIS network in the Islamic world. The fifth reason that the ISIS and terrorism is anti-Islamic Western conspiracy is the fact that ISIS and terrorism is the worst enemy of Islam and Muslim than any other religion in the world. On the ground that over 99% victim of ISIS and terrorism are only Muslims, although there are some terrorist attacks in the West, like in France, UK, Belgium, and other countries, in which a few hundred people in total have been killed or injured so far, purportedly by ISIS and terrorism. But those victims in the West make less than 1% of the ongoing atrocity and massacres committed by ISIS and terrorism in the Islamic countries like Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Libya, Yemen, Somalia, Pakistan, and others, in which millions and millions of people are displaced, homeless, hungry, wounded, killed, and cities and towns have been ruined completely. Furthermore, the terrorist attacks in the West are, in fact, the Western conspiracies by itself to purport that ISIS and terrorism is a real threat to the West to justify the ongoing Islamic Darwinism. For instance, just like Ronald Fedler, the recent terrorist in London attack was not a Muslim, but a British Christian, and his real name was Adrian Russell Elams. But the UK government, the spy agency, changed his name to Khalid Masood to purport that he was a converted Muslim. Based on the foregoing, ISIS and terrorists are mainly Western spies, fake converted Muslim, and mercenary from different countries who are hired killers by the West and serve the interests of the West in the Islamic world. Furthermore, the ongoing ISIS is not in you anti-Islamic Western bloody politics, but the continuation of the same war on terror for the invasion of the Islamic countries, which was declared by the Bush administration in 2001. For clarification, after the collapse of the former Soviet Union, when the US became the sole superpower of the world, then the colonial West impatiently has begun the invasion of the Islamic countries to occupy the oil, mineral, and natural resources of the Islamic world. As a result, the Bush administration, supported by the colonial Europe, declared war on the Holy Islam in 2001 as war on terror. In fact, the first prey of the war on terror was Afghanistan. Then when the Anglo-American invaded the mineral-rich Afghanistan after the 9/11 tragedy as war on terror. After the invasion of Afghanistan, the Anglo-American invaded the oil-rich Iraq in 2003 by false accusation of weapon of mass destruction. After Iraq in 2011, the US and its NATO allies invaded the oil-rich Libya for regime change and had changed Gaddafi government to a pro-Western regime in Libya. The Osama story for the invasion of the mineral-rich Afghanistan was orchestrated by the US in 1994, almost 6 years prior to 9/11 tragedy. So terrorism is the Western conspiracies from Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan to the present ISIS in the Islamic countries. So let us now take a short break and hear one Arabic song, and after that we will conclude the subject. And please be with me. The Arabic song that Okay, like as we have mentioned, terrorism is Western conspiracies from Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan to the present ISIS game in the Islamic countries. For clarification, the Osama conspiracy for occupation of Afghanistan was also first started by the pro-Western Saudi monarchy when King Fahd bin Abdulaziz had revoked Osama passport on March 5, 1994, while Osama was living in Sudan at that time. After 1994, Osama was living in Sudan illegally without any passport and nationality. In May 1996, the United States expelled Osama bin Laden from Sudan to Afghanistan without proper passport and visa. The truth about Osama was disclosed by the Sudani government when President Bill Clinton on August 20, 1998 attacked both Afghanistan and Sudan by cruise missile in retaliation for Osama bombing of American embassy in Kenya and Tanzania. As a result of the U.S. attack, 20 Sudani people were killed and the Al-Shifa pharmaceutical company in Khartoum was destroyed. Then the Sudani government disclosed the truth about Osama, and the Sudani defense minister Fatih al-Arwa officially stated that Osama bin Laden was living in Sudan. The Saudi government revoked Osama passport in 1994. After 1994, Osama was living in Sudan without passport and nationality. Then in 1996, the United States spy agency CIA requested the Sudani government to send Osama from Sudan to Afghanistan. Therefore, the Sudani government expelled Osama from Sudan to Afghanistan by the specific request of the United States. So why did the U.S. attack Sudan in retaliation of Osama for the Kenya and Tanzania bombing? Based on these facts, the U.S. brought its own enemy, Osama bin Laden, illegally to Afghanistan in 1996, obviously for the reason to justify the invasion of the mineral-rich Afghanistan. In fact, both Osama and Hamid Karzai were pre-9/11 conspiracies for the occupation of Afghanistan. Hamid Karzai was also not elected by Afghanistan people in 2001, but based on credible evidence, Karzai was appointed by the State Department of the United States in 1999 to be the next president of Afghanistan after the Taliban government. So both Osama and Hamid Karzai story were orchestrated by the United States a few years prior to 9/11 for the invasion of the mineral-rich Afghanistan. Based on the foregoing, terrorism and ISIS are created by the West from day one until the present time. On the ground that it is America which makes enemy and heroes by itself in the Islamic world. In other words, those were not Afghanistan people who made the U.S. enemy Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan or the U.S. hero Hamid Karzai in Afghanistan, but both Hamid Karzai and Osama were made by the United States in Afghanistan. Also, it is the U.S. and the West which create ISIS enemy and terrorism in the Islamic world. It is not Islam and the Muslim which make enemy for the West in the Islamic world. Although the West and the fake Western media is involved in tons and tons of anti-Islamic propaganda on 24-hour basis and accuses Muslim and link the ISIS and terrorism to the Holy Islam, but in fact the opposite is true. What means that the root cause of the ongoing ISIS and terrorism in Syria, Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, Yemen, and other Islamic countries is the Western neo-colonialism. For clarification, in the present time, the world is mainly divided in 5 big parts, which are China, Russia, the West, Latin America, and the Islamic world. In Latin America, from Mexico to Brazil, there are around 33 countries, but Latin America has rich culture and just mind their own business. Historically, the entire Latin America was previously occupied by the colonial West, but now Latin America is independent from the West. Today, there is no ISIS and terrorism in the 33 countries of Latin America. The main reason for that is the fact that Latin America has freedom and independence, and the West could not make ISIS and terrorism in Latin America. For instance, there are 1.5 million Muslims in Brazil, but all Muslim and Christian live peacefully, and there is no terrorism in Brazil. Anyway, Russia and China are emerging superpower of the world in the present time. Both China and the present Russia mainly want businesses and economic relation with the world countries. Therefore, both Russia and China are not threat to the sovereignty of the Islamic countries. In the present time, the animosity is only between the West and the Islamic world. In other words, now the rest of the world is safe and peaceful, but mainly the Islamic world is the prey of the Western imperialist predators. In fact, it is the West that not only insult the holy religion of the over 2 billion Muslim, but also it is the root cause of the ongoing bloodshed, terrorism, ISIS, and destabilization of the Islamic world. Based on the foregoing reason, the only solution for the ongoing terrorism and ISIS in the Islamic world is freedom and independence from the Western imperialism, which is the root cause of terrorism, ISIS, and bloodshed in the Islamic countries. In fact, the ongoing war of the United States and NATO against terrorism and ISIS in the Islamic countries will never eradicate terrorism, but exponentially increase terrorism and ISIS from Afghanistan to Libya and in the Islamic world. As a matter of fact, as long as the ongoing war, as the ongoing Western ambition for exploitation of the Islamic world exists, the bloodshed, wars, ISIS, terrorism, and the insult of the Muslim in Islam will never end. So the only proper remedy for eradication of terrorism and ISIS and to make peace and stability in the Islamic world is freedom and independence from the Western invasion and intervention. Contrary to the Western fake media, there is no moderate Islam or radical or terrorist Islam. In fact, Islam is only one religion, which is the religion of peace, honesty, unity, tolerance, kindness, cooperation, and the highest good of moral and human behavior. In reality, terrorism, ISIS, and radicalism are all 100% anti-Islamic, but Western political conspiracies in the Islamic world, as have been mentioned. In fact, it is the colonial West which has been involved in exploitation, wars, bloodshed, slavery, genocide, stealing, human rights abuses, and occupation of the almost entire countries in the continents of Africa, Asia, and Latin America in the past 500 years until the present time. For clarification, West does not mean, not to be understood, West does not mean the 99% noble people of the United States or the Western Europe. West only means the 1% super rich bloodsuckers of the United States and Western Europe, who are the enemy of all people and predator of the Islamic world in the present time. In reality, the West is the most ruthless enemy of Muslims in the present time, which is not only the creator of ISIS and terrorism, but also the biggest obstacle for restoration of democracy and human rights in the Islamic world. For instance, the Western imposed single-family oppressive monarchies and Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Jordan, Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman, Qatar, and the killer military junta in Egypt have been involved in massive human rights abuses for decades. For example, in terms of women's rights, the Saudi monarchy is the most abusive regime in the entire world, in which women have no right to drive their own car. A while ago, a 24-year young Saudi girl, Dina Ali Laslum, on April 11, 2017, fled the oppressive monarchy of Saudi Arabia to seek asylum in Australia, but she was detained in Manila airport. The young girl, Dina Laslum, was in desperate need for help because her life was in danger. The Saudi girl was crying and saying that her family would kill her if she go back to Saudi Arabia. But despite her life was in danger, she was forced, kidnapped, and returned to the butchers in Saudi Arabia. In fact, all the self-proclaimed human rights organizations of the West, the United Nations, the European Union, and the United States, not only had failed to save Dina Laslum, but also all have been silent regarding the young girl's life. The main reason for this obvious Western hypocrisy is the fact that the IRA, semi-independent monarchy of Saudi Arabia, served the interests of the West since 1945, when President Roosevelt and King Abdulaziz had a meeting, and King Abdulaziz had agreed to the creation of Israel on the Palestinian land and to have access to the Saudi Isle in exchange for kingship in Saudi Arabia forever. Based on the foregoing, the West is not only the enemy of all Muslims, but also united against the Islamic world in the present time. Therefore, it is the religious duty of all the over 2 billion Muslims of the world to be united against the West and defend the Holy Islam and the hundreds of millions long-suffering people in the Islamic world who are the prey and the victim of the Western imperialist predators in the present time. In conclusion, the only solution for the eradication of the ongoing terrorism in ISIS and the ongoing bloodshed in the Islamic world is freedom and independence from the Western imperialism. In fact, Islam is not only the passive practice of the 5 pillars, but the most important part of Islam is jihad. Contrary to the Western anti-Islamic propaganda, jihad does not mean killing of innocent people, but jihad means to tell the truth against the oppressors and to defend and help the oppressed people by the oppressors. Therefore, briefly, all Muslims of the world, which make almost over 30% of the global population, to be united for the following 3 common Islamic goals. 1, all the world's Muslims have religious duty to defend the Holy Islam, which is being insulted by the West and their false and immoral media on daily basis. If the world, over 2 billion Muslims, defend their Holy Islam by truth and facts, as has been mentioned, it will not only stop and discredit the entire Western anti-Islamic propaganda universally, but also it will help the 99% noble people of the West to know the truth and facts about Islam. 2, all the Muslim world have Quranic duty in the present time to support the resistance for freedom and independence against the ongoing Western occupation and military intervention in the Islamic countries, including but not limited to Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Yemen, Palestine, and others who are fighting for liberation of their countries. And three, all the world Muslims have Islamic duty to support the people of Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Jordan, Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman, Qatar, and Egypt to get rid of the oppressive, rotten, Western imposed single-family monarchies and the killer military junta in Egypt, which have been involved in tremendous human rights abuses and oppression for decades. In 21st, for clarification, in 21st century, these Western imposed single-family ruling monarchy have absolute privileges, absolute wealth, and absolute power. But the 99% people in this monarchy are deprived from their basic right and do not have 1% right in choosing their leader and government for decades. So the 99% people in these oppressive Arab monarchies need the support of all Muslims to make democracy and free elected governments to end the oppressive Western imposed human rights abusive monarchies and save the life of millions Din al-Aslum, who are the victims of these abusive regime. So now let us take another short break and hear one Pashto song from Kabul concert, and then we will start the second subject. Sorry, this is a good singer. Her name is Laila, good Pashto singer. And next thing, if anyone has doubt, this is the Caravan of Truth program. This is truth. Truth means God. God is all truth. Truth helps everybody. If anyone has doubt about that, my program is the first Friday of each new month. This hour, give me a call during the month, and I will bring you alive. You can talk whatever you think is not right. But if that is truth, then just do not need to call me. Now, in the second subject, we will explain the major problem of the Afghanistan people and the solution. In fact, since Afghanistan has been occupied by the United States, supported by the West, the people of Afghanistan have multiple problems. But here we explain the 5 major problems of the country and the solution. The 5 major problems of the long-suffering Afghanistan people under the ongoing 16-year Western occupation are the ongoing war and bloodshed, 2, the narcotic production and smuggling, 3, the Western imposed minority warlord regime in Kabul, 4, the ISIS and terrorism, and 5, the destruction of morale, education, and absolute control of information and media by the West in Afghanistan. For clarification, the first major problem during the ongoing occupation is the war and bloodshed in Afghanistan. The main reason for the ongoing bloodshed is the occupation and the presence of foreign troops in Afghanistan. As a historic and cultural fact, there is no peace and stability in Afghanistan under foreign occupation on the ground that Afghanistan culture is free and incompatible with foreign invasions. These facts are clearly proven during the British, former USSR, and now the US West invasion of Afghanistan. Historically, the British Empire invaded Afghanistan in 19th century, which resulted in 3 Anglo-Afghan War in 1839, 1880, and 1919. And 1919. Afghanistan people were the first in the world who defeated the British colonialism in its peak and liberated Afghanistan in 1999. In fact, all the rest of the British colonies were freed after the World War II, when the British Empire became weaker by Nazi Germany and lost control on its numerous colonies in the world. Similarly, when the former Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in 1979, Afghanistan people were in war with the former Soviet Red Army for almost 10 years until the last Soviet soldier left Afghanistan on February 14, 1989. Similarly to the English and Soviet invasions, in the present time, Afghanistan people are fighting against the current US NATO invasion. Based on the Afghan culture and history, the present war and bloodshed in Afghanistan will continue until the complete withdrawal of the US NATO troops from the country. The second major problem of Afghanistan is the opium production and smuggling. For clarification, before the Anglo-American invasion, opium cultivation was prohibited in Afghanistan. But as soon as Afghanistan was occupied in 2001, both the West and the Western imposed Kabul regime started opium cultivation and smuggling in the country. The foreign soldiers were telling and encouraging the Afghan farmers to grow opium instead of rice, wheat, and corn because it is more profitable. Based on the credible evidence, one of Hamid Karzai governor had been telling to the farmers of Kandahar that the Kandahar people are allowed to grow opium poppies on the roof of their houses. As a result of this green light, Afghanistan produces over 90% of the world opium today, and its production is increasing gradually. In fact, today, both the Western colonial mafia and the Kabul mafia regime make over $100 billion annually from Afghanistan opium production and smuggling at the expense of Afghanistan and neighboring people. Based on credible survey, today Afghanistan opium kill around 100,000 people each year in the world, of whom majority of the victims are Afghanistan people. There is no restriction on opium cultivation, production, smuggling, using, and selling in Afghanistan during the ongoing Western occupation in the past 16 years. Today, Afghanistan has almost 4 million opium drug addicts patients, including 1.5 million children, and their number is increasing exponentially. Today, opium and heroin kill around 5 times more people in Afghanistan than the ongoing violence in the country. Just please see this short video and witness the Western imperialism, narcotic crime in Afghanistan. Can the video?
Viewer discretion is advised.
All these children are addicted to drugs.
The teacher's just been going along the row of children, telling me,
Chief Dwabeg told me there were 400 people in his village, and now all of them used opium.
he says, we've got so many problems in this village, but our biggest problem is drugs. We've got so many villagers who are addicted. Men, women, and even the children of our village are all addicted to drugs.
We were taken to meet a family.
Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum. Naam man Ramita hast.
Talib Shah and his wife Mary Nagar told me out of their 6 children, 3 of them were opium addicts. 11-year-old Sangin Mamad had been smoking the drug since he was 3 years old.
As soon as his dad said, it's time to smoke, he jumped up, he knew exactly what to do. He just put his head on the pillow and he lay down here, and he's just waiting for his dad to give him opium.
Talib Shah explained his son has to smoke 3 times a day, otherwise he suffers from painful withdrawal symptoms.
I'm just talking to Sangin Mamad, and it's really sad because he's just a little boy, but he's just out of it. He's talking to me in a whisper, you just saw, and he says that when he doesn't smoke, he feels real pain. And I asked him, do you ever go out and play with the kids, play with other kids? And he said, no, I'm just in pain.
Mary Nagar originally gave her son opium to cure a stomachache, but now the family take the drug for a very different reason.
Mary Nagar says there's not enough food to feed the whole family, and when you smoke opium, you lose your appetite. Why don't you spend your money on food rather than opium?
Talib Shah said food was more expensive than opium.
To feed the whole family for a day costs about £3, but to buy about this much opium, which lasts a day, costs about £2. And when they take this, they feel less hungry, so they eat less. Do you have food in the house now? Mary Nagar just brought me over to show me what food they've got to eat tonight. There's this flask of tea and just these 2 pieces of dried old bread. And this is to feed 9 people in this family. Mary Nagar saying this bread is all we've got. We've got nothing. No meat, no fruit, no vegetables. Hichi, nothing.
Yeah, this is the Western imperialism crime against the innocent Afghanistan people and children. Just to show you. And this was just example. The third major problem is the destruction of moral education and absolute control of information and media by the West in Afghanistan. This third major problem of Afghanistan could be better clarified in the recently written article written in the recently this third problem will be better clarified in the recent article written by American journalist Andre Woltz-Speck about Afghanistan. Mr. Woltz-Speck states in his article that after more than 15 years of brutal Western occupation, Afghanistan appears to be thoroughly ruined, not only in terms of its infrastructure and standard of living, but perhaps even more significantly, Afghanistan is destroyed morally and intellectually. Mr. Woltz-Speck states that the only resistance the West is facing in Afghanistan come from the Taliban. Almost all intellectual and artistic struggle against the occupation of Afghanistan have been destroyed, contained, but are frightened into near absolute silence. In fact, the occupation is not even called occupation in Afghanistan anymore. The journalists continue that a wealthy family in Panjshir told me that we are fully dependent on the presence of NATO troops in our country. Only foreigners are offering us well-paid and stable job. If they leave, we have to follow them to emigrate to the United States and Europe. The journalist states that West has managed a very complex and tremendously successful indoctrination campaign in Afghanistan, enslaving the nation by applying various weapons. One of those weapons is, of course, education. The American journalist states that the American University of Kabul is literally regurgitating thousands of young sons and daughters of the elite who, after the proper dose of indoctrination and colorful diploma, those Afghans are permanently loyal to the West. The nation curriculum has been defined at the United States Embassy in the office of the World Bank. The American journalists further write that there is virtually an absolute control of information and media in Afghanistan, as in all countries occupied by the West, the so-called social media play a vital role, setting tendency and directing discussion patterns. The journalist states that in Afghanistan there is oppressive local governments, military, and police that are always ready to suppress any open criticism of the Western occupation or even the world of occupation itself in Afghanistan. The American journalist states that an academic professor, Javed Amin, from the Academy of Social Science of Afghanistan, explained to me in Kabul that we do not have anyone openly critical of the United States or the West here in Afghanistan because it is simply not allowed by the government. I personally do not like the American, but I cannot tell you anything else, even I work for the government. Nothing could be exhibited in Afghanistan without permission from the government. And since Karzai, the government is controlled by the West. The American journalist states that one of the main goals of the Western propaganda in Afghanistan is to discredit the former Soviet Union as well as the present-day Russia and to smear China by all available indoctrination means. It is because, if unchecked, both China and Russia could win the heart and mind of Afghanistan people. The fourth major problem of Afghanistan is the Western imposed Northern Alliance minority warlords regime in Kabul. What means that when the US invaded Afghanistan in 2001, the Bush administration sidelined the major Pashtun ethnicity and had installed Hamid Karzai non-Pashtun regime in Kabul, which was almost entirely made from the Northern Alliance warlords of Tajik, Uzbek, and Hazara ethnic minorities who make around 14%, 8%, and 10% of the Afghanistan population respectively. In other words, the West made an anti-democracy minority regime in which almost all the defense, spy, and security forces of Kabul regime were made from a few provinces of the Northern Alliance, and the major Pashtun ethnicity has just a symbolic rule. In other words, just like in the United States, a black Latino, not white government could not rule the United States. This is exactly the case in the present Kabul regime in Afghanistan. This is the reason that the Western imposed ethnic minority, non-Pashtun regime in Kabul is in life support and will collapse without the NATO US military help. For clarification, Afghanistan means Afghan means Pashtun, and Afghanistan literally means the country of Pashtun. Pashtun are the major ethnicity in Afghanistan, which make over 60% of the country population. Historically, Afghanistan was made by Pashtun and have been ruling by Pashtun rulers for the past almost 300 years. In fact, Pashtun are not only majority in Afghanistan, but also the second majority in the neighboring Pakistan, and the population of Pashtun ethnicity in total exceeds 60 million people. Therefore, the Pashtun cooperation is key for peace and stability in both Afghanistan and Pakistan. Based on the historic British literature, Pashtun are the kingmaker and kingbreaker ethnicity in Afghanistan. Therefore, the present Western imposed anti-democracy minority regime in Kabul, which is made of ethnic minority fascist warlords, is not only unacceptable to the majority people in Afghanistan, but also will never be able to rule the majority and restore peace in the country in the next 100 years. The fifth problem created by the West in Afghanistan is the ISIS terrorism. In fact, there was no ISIS in Afghanistan, but the West created ISIS terrorism in Afghanistan, just like they created in Iraq and Syria. The ISIS in Afghanistan did not come from Iraq and Syria, but the ISIS in Afghanistan was created inside Afghanistan from different elements, including the Kabul regime militia, Western spies, and mercenaries from the neighboring countries. For instance, when the US dropped the mother of all bombs in Achin district in Afghanistan a few weeks ago, the blast had killed 13 Indian ISIS terrorists and 7 Tajik ISIS terrorists in Afghanistan who were mercenaries from India and Tajikistan. Unfortunately, it is now clear that India not only supports the Western occupation of Afghanistan, but also helped the West in creation of ISIS in Afghanistan. In fact, the India government regularly sent ISIS mercenaries to Afghanistan and spread terrorism in Afghanistan and in the region. The main reason for the creation of ISIS in Afghanistan is not only for political propaganda to justify the ongoing occupation, but also the West is trying to destabilize the Central Asia and the entire region by ISIS terrorists in order to make a big headache for both Russia and China, which are the two emerging superpower and global rival of the West. Just 2 minutes. Of the West. Based on the foregoing, as has been mentioned, the root cause of the 5 major problems of Afghanistan is both the Western imperialism and the Kabul Western enslaved regime. Therefore, the only solution for all the 5 major problems in Afghanistan is freedom and independence from the Western imperialism. In other words, Afghanistan people have no other choice but to resist and defeat the US NATO invasion to liberate Afghanistan and replace the Kabul enslaved regime by an independent national government. In fact, any political solution under the ongoing Western occupation will not resolve any problem, but will increase all the 5 major problems of Afghanistan. The Western imposed Kabul mafia regime is an incurable cancer. Therefore, any peace negotiation under occupation are futile and will never succeed to make a peaceful, opium-free, ISIS-free Afghanistan and to make a democracy-based majority national government to restore the free media and the morally and intellectually destroyed Afghanistan by the Western imperialism, as has been mentioned. Sorry, I have no time for the third subject, but inshallah we will talk about the third subject in next program. And my time is up, and you have a great month. Salam alaikum. See you after 1 month.
آریانا افغانستان یگانه شبکه تلویزیونی ملی افغانها در خارج از کشور.
این سریال هیچ واقعه تاریخی را اثبات نمی کند. برای به تصویر کشیدن این وقایع تاریخی، بازآفرینی‌های نمایشی مهمی انجام شدند. در فرم تاریخی، نام هلکابای تبدیل به جودابای شده که در تاریخ بسیار مشهور است. این سریال مجادلات و یا ارتباطات قومی و خانوادگی هیچ جامعه ای را از نظر تاریخی اثبات نمی کند و قصد جریح دار کردن احساسات هیچ جامعه و قومی را ندارد.
جودا و اکبر.
تنها چیزی که من از شما میخوام فقط یه جوابه که نمیدونم چرا یه ندایی از درونم میگه که جوابتون رو بدونم. به خدا قسم اگه شما جواب بدین من گوش میدم ملک جودا. شما رو به کریشنا و کالیماتون قسم میدم که عبادتشون میکنین. به والدینتون قسمتون میدم که براشون احترام قائلین و به هر شخصی قسمتون میدم که دوستش دارین به هم جواب بدین. به من بگین که شما اون شخص رو میشناسین؟ همون قدری که ازتون میپرسم فقط همون قد جواب بدین.
آره.
شما قبل از ازدواجمونم اونو میدیدی؟ به خاطر من که هیچ، حداقل به خاطر کریشناتون جواب بدی.
آره.
شما از کی اونو میشناسین؟
از بچگی.
یه سوال دیگه و آخریش. شما بهش علاقه دارین؟ دوستش دارین؟
من
همون قدری که ازتون میپرسم فقط همون قد جواب بدین. ملک جودا به هم راحت بگین که اونو دوست دارین یا نه.
آره.
شما ملکه جودا، شما منو شرمسار کردین ملکه جودا. شما با ایجاد رابطه با یه مرد غریبه و اعتراف به اون رابطمون شرمسار کردین ملکه جودا. امروز من شرمسارم، امروز سلطنت مغول شرمساره، امروز والدینتونم کاملا شرمسارم. بیشتر از همه ملکه جودا اصول راجپوت هاست که به خاطر شما شرمساره. من عاشق شما شده بودم ملکه جودا. من تو وجود شما نور عشق دیده بودم و شما اون روشنایی رو ناپاک کرده با زناکاریتون. من شما رو از این رابطه آزاد میکنم و به خاطر خدا فردا صبح قبل از طلوع اولین اشعه خورشید شما از اینجا برین. از اینجا برین.